Welcome back to the Deep Dive, listeners. Today we're taking you deep, deep into the world of, yeah, you guessed it, the Illuminati. Hold on, hold on. Before you think, oh, another conspiracy theory podcast, not this time.
Not at all.
We're going full history nerd here. We're talking about actual historical manuscripts. Real deal stuff about the rituals and the ranks, the real doctrines of this super secret society.
It's like getting, a backstage pass to their inner circle, separating, the fact from the fiction. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. A VIP pass to history, right?
Exactly.
So, to help us navigate this historical maze, we have our expert back with us again.
Always a pleasure to be here.
And we're mainly going to be drawing from The Secret School of Wisdom, The Authentic Ritual and Doctrines of the Illuminati.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating book by Joseph Wages and Reinhard Markner.
Exactly. They've done the hard work, analyzing all the original materials, the real deal Illuminati documents.
Good deal.
So, listeners, our mission, if you choose to accept it, is to move beyond those crazy myths, to really, really understand how the historical Illuminati, the real one, worked. What were they all about?
What was going on behind those closed doors?
Exactly. What was going on behind those closed doors? So let's kick things off with the first step into this mysterious world, the Minerval degree.
Right. The entry point.
It's also known as the Illuminatus Minor, or the Lesser Illuminati degree. So you're like a baby Illuminati, basically.
You're just getting started, dipping your toes in the water.
Exactly. But it wasn't always a smooth process, right? I mean, this Minerval degree, it went through some changes, some evolution.
It did. It did. Like anything, it takes time to perfect. And the initial drafts of this degree were, well, let's just say they weren't exactly perfect.
There were some growing pains.
There were. A key figure here, a guy named Baron von Nigg, he was super influential in shaping the Illuminati system. He actually called an early draft of the Minerval degree ludicrous.
Ludicrous? That's pretty harsh feedback. So what exactly made it so ridiculous? What needed fixing?
Well, a lot of the initial confusion stemmed from the structure and the content of the degree. They needed to make things clear, so they took the explanations of the Minerval allegories, those symbolic stories they used to teach deeper meanings,
right,
and they put those right into this degree. They also made it clear that some early instructions weren't meant to be like a formal degree in themselves. It was all about, refining and clarifying.
like cleaning up the curriculum, so to speak.
Exactly. And finally, around May 1781, they had a revised version. This was the Minerval degree that really stuck.
So even a super secret organization like this, they had their edits, their revisions.
Everyone needs an editor, right?
Exactly. Even the Illuminati. Now, we were talking about those Minerval allegories, those symbolic stories. I'm curious, did those just appear out of thin air? Or were there, any influences, anything that shapes those stories?
That's a really good question. And it turns out there might be a connection to another group, the African Builders. Now, they were a Paramasonic society.
Paramasonic.
Yeah, I mean, they were like Freemasons, but not quite. They had similarities, but they were their own thing. And they were based in Berlin.
Okay, so like the Freemasons' cool cousin or something.
Something like that. Anyway, these guys, they wrote a book in 1770 called Krata Rapoa. It was all about, get this, ancient Egyptian mysteries.
Ancient Egyptian mysteries, okay.
Yeah, and get this, the fourth degree described in their book, it has some really striking similarities to the Illuminati's Minerval degree.
Wow, so there's like a connection, a borrowing of ideas, maybe.
Possibly, yeah. And these Egyptian mysteries, they're fascinating. For example, Krata Rapoa describes a ritual called the Battle of the Shadows.
Battle of the Shadows, that sounds intense.
It was a really dramatic ceremony. Imagine this. Someone who wants to advance in this group.
Okay.
They're attacked and captured by masked figures with torches and snakes. Pretty scary, right?
Yeah, that's a little creepy.
Then, when they're unblindfolded, they're in this grand hall in front of a king and this figure called the demiurge.
So like a powerful, mystical figure, the demiurge.
Yeah, exactly. And they get praised, but also warned about, future challenges. Then they have to drink this bitter drink.
Oh.
And they're given these symbolic objects, the shield of Minerva, sometimes called Isis, the boots of Anubis, linked to Mercury, the coat and cap of Orcus, and a sword.
So wait, like a whole costume change, basically.
Yeah, kind of. And with all these, symbolic objects, the candidate has to do something pretty crazy.
What is it?
They have to symbolically decapitate a fake body of a beautiful woman. It all takes place in the cave of the enemy. And then the king's demiurge, he applauds this. He says it's like cutting off the Gorgon's head.
So lots of symbolism, lots of dark imagery.
Yeah. And after all that, the candidate, they're rewarded with privileges and a medal with Isis or Minerva on it as an owl.
Okay, so that's a pretty wild ceremony. I mean, how does all this, Battle of the Shadows stuff connect to the Minerval degree? That sounded a lot more, low key.
Right, the Minerval initiation wasn't quite as dramatic, but there's some really interesting shared themes, especially in the symbolism.
Like what?
Well, Craterapoa, it actually explains what all those objects represent.
Okay.
The helmet stands for wisdom. The Gorgon's head is about controlling your passions. The shield is about protection from, people talking bad about you. The pillar is about being steadfast. The water jug represents a thirst for knowledge. The quiver is eloquence. The spear is persuasion. And the palm branch, that's peace.
So it's all about like personal growth, becoming a better person.
Exactly. And those are like central ideas in the Illuminati's Nerval degree, too.
Right, right. Self-improvement, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And even the owl, right? It's connected to Minerva, the goddess of wisdom, in both Craterapoa and the Minerval degree. It's like this intellectual and philosophical link between them.
So even the Illuminati, they were borrowing from older traditions.
Exactly. They weren't just making stuff up entirely. They were building on what came before.
That makes sense. Now let's move on to the Minerval assemblies, like their regular meetings. What were these like visually? What was the vibe they were going for?
Well, they definitely put a lot of thought into the atmosphere. They wanted to create a sense of reference.
Okay.
So in the assembly room, you'd have the superior, the leader, right?
Okay.
They'd have a small white lamp on their table with a shade.
Okay.
But here's the interesting part. Behind the shade, there was an image of Pallas.
Which is another name for Minerva, right? The goddess of wisdom.
Exactly. So wisdom was like front and center, even in the lighting.
Okay, I get it. They're really hammering home this wisdom theme.
They were. And there were also 2 tinted glass lamps in the room and chairs for all the members.
Okay.
And then the centerpiece in the middle of the floor was a pyramid.
A pyramid. Okay. So not just any regular meeting room.
Definitely not. And at the start, only the 3 lamps would be lit.
So it's kind of dim, a little bit mysterious.
Yeah, creating that atmosphere of reverence, encouraging, deep thought and reflection.
Reverence, but not scary, not boring either.
It was a balance, a delicate balance. Now, imagine you're a new recruit. You're finally going through the initiation.
Okay.
You're led to the lodge, often by a friend who's already a member, but you're kept separate from everyone else.
Like a little bit of anticipation, a little bit of mystery.
Exactly. And then they put you in this dark chamber.
Ooh, a dark chamber.
Yeah, and you're there for about half an hour before the real initiation starts.
So just sitting there in the dark for 30 minutes.
It was all part of the process, It was meant to prepare you mentally, make you introspective.
Gets you in the right headspace. So what happens after this, after the dark chamber?
Well, after those 30 minutes, the preparer and another brother come to get you. And they're both wearing hats.
They're wearing hats. Okay.
Yeah, it's part of the ritual. Then they take your hat and rapier, and those are symbolically given to the worshipful master.
So, a symbolic surrendering of some of your worldly possessions.
Yeah, something like that. And then the treasurer comes and collects the initiation fee.
Oh, so there's a fee. Even for secret societies, you got to pay the dues.
Right. Practical matters. It's not all symbolism and mystery.
Exactly. But, speaking of symbolism, is there more to it? More symbolic actions?
Oh, absolutely. Now, the master of ceremonies, he comes in with some serving brethren, and they start this whole symbolic stripping. Well, not literally. They make you bare your right knee. They make you step down in your left shoe. They bare your left breast, and then they cover your eyes with a hoodwink.
So like a symbolic stripping away of the outside world, the material world.
Yeah, that's a common theme in these kinds of rituals.
Makes sense.
It's about turning away from those worldly things and focusing inward.
Okay, so you're hoodwinked, you're symbolically stripped. What happens next?
Well, then comes the mysterious journey.
Mysterious journey. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
There are 3 knocks on the door. Then the junior warden comes in, and he puts the tip of his rapier, very gently, on your chest.
Ooh, a little bit of pressure there.
Just a bit. And then he leads you through the lodge room, stopping at specific points.
Okay.
And at each point, the other brethren, they do this special Minerval sign, and then they drop their hands, making a sound with their aprons.
So it's a very coordinated, choreographed kind of journey.
Exactly. And everyone's eyes are on the worshipful master the whole time.
So it's like a test, a way to impress the importance of the occasion on the candidate.
Absolutely. And at the end of the journey, you end up between the 2 wardens.
So surrounded. Now, did they just make all this up, or did they borrow from other groups?
Well, they actually incorporated some elements from Freemasonry. They used part of a Freemasonic catechism, like a set of questions and answers.
Right. I've heard of those.
So they'd ask you if you were a Freemason, where you were accepted, the dimensions of the lodge, why you wanted to join, that you were in darkness and wanted light, that kind of thing.
Right.
And they even described you as neither naked nor clothed, neither barefoot nor shod, divested of all metal.
So, it's clear they were taking inspiration from the Freemasons adapting their rituals.
Exactly. They weren't afraid to borrow and make it their own.
So what happens at the very end? What does the new Minerval actually receive?
Well, the big moment is getting the secret sign, the word, and the glip of the Minerval degree.
So now they can identify themselves to other Minervals.
Right. It's like their secret handshake. And then the worshipful master, he gives you a hug, like a welcome to the brotherhood,
Okay.
and he gives back your hat and rapier. But there's a catch.
What's that?
He tells you can only use that rapier to defend your honor, the honor of your brethren, and the well-being of the order.
So the sword, it's not for aggression, it's for protection.
Exactly. And then they place you near the pillars of Jachin and Boaz.
Those are important in Freemasonry too, right?
They are. They represent strength and establishment.
Okay.
And then you're given the rough ashlar to work on.
Rough ashlar.
Yeah, it's like this rough stone, and it symbolizes the imperfections within yourself. And you work on it under the blazing star, which represents the soul, eternal, and true light.
So the idea is to improve yourself, to smooth out those rough edges.
Exactly. It's about inner transformation, guided by wisdom and truth.
That's a powerful image. So, someone goes through this whole initiation, they become a Minerval. What happens then? Is it just a one-time thing?
No, not at all. They have these regular Minerval assemblies. They're like the regular meetings.
Okay.
And they had specific dates marked in a special Illuminati calendar.
Okay, so they're organized.
Oh, yeah, very organized. And they could also hold extra assemblies if needed.
So, if there's breaking news in the Illuminati world.
Something like that. And the date and time, those would depend on where they were and how many members there were.
Right. Makes sense.
The superior, the leader of the group, would let everyone know. And if they had a lot of Minervals in one place, they might even have multiple assemblies.
Okay, so how did these assemblies actually work? What was the format?
Well, the members would hang out in another room first, an antechamber, until the superior called them in.
Okay.
And then they'd enter one by one in order of how senior they were in the degree.
So like a procession.
Yeah. And the superior, he'd bow before the pyramid and make a special sign.
Okay.
And then the censor would come in, then the cancellarius or the questor if there wasn't one, and then the secretarius.
So everyone has their place, their specific role.
Exactly. And they used knocks with a key to signal they were coming in, especially for new members. The censor even locked the door during introductions.
So very ritualistic, very, controlled and secretive.
Yeah, it was all very deliberate. Now, these meetings, they weren't just about, administrative stuff.
Oh, okay.
They had a big intellectual and moral component, too.
Was what?
Well, they would recite or read an ode.
A poem.
Yeah, kind of. Like our source has one called Hail, Sacred Wisdom. It's all about praising wisdom, being good, and overcoming ignorance.
So very much in line with their whole philosophy.
Absolutely. And after the ode, the chancellor or secretary would announce any orders from higher up, any tasks that needed doing.
Keeping everyone in the loop.
Yeah, and then they would read the statutes, the rules, both the general ones and the specific ones for Minervals.
Okay.
But here's the cool part. To help everyone grow intellectually and morally, the superior would read out loud from either the Bible or from philosophers like Seneca or Epictetus.
It's like a little bit of moral instruction, a little bit of philosophy mixed in.
Exactly. They said it was to better and illuminate our spirits.
I like that. So it wasn't just all rules and orders. Now, did the Minervals, did they have any special symbols or badges or anything?
They did. They had a specific medallion that showed they were a Minerval. And for those who were Illuminatus minor, the next level up,
Right.
they wore the same medallion but with a wider ribbon.
So, a subtle way to show your rank within the order.
Yeah, it was all about those subtle distinctions. Now, let's talk about the core doctrines. What did they actually believe? What were the expectations for a Minerval?
Right. Get down to the nitty-gritty.
The biggest thing was brotherly support, helping each other out, especially those who were, being oppressed.
Okay.
And, of course, constantly improving yourself, your heart and mind.
So like a personal growth club with a social justice mission.
Yeah, kind of. And they had a list of virtues they expected you to cultivate.
Okay. Like what?
Being happy with your place in society, having a well-ordered home, respecting authority, the government, your parents, older people.
So, being a good citizen, being a good person.
Exactly. And valuing education, standing up for your brethren if they were being slandered.
Okay, so high moral standards.
Definitely. Now, did they just tell you these things and leave you to it? Not exactly. They had some ongoing tasks, to keep you on track.
Oh, like homework.
Kind of. They wanted you to keep a personal diary, and then every month you had to submit these sealed complaints.
Complaints. Like what about
It's not totally clear, but probably about any injustices they saw or maybe problems within the order. And then they had to do these character sketches of people they met.
So like psychological profiles.
Yeah, something like that. It was all about reflecting on yourself, on the world, and trying to improve.
Makes sense. So what was the big picture? What did they want to achieve with all this?
Well, they really believed they could make the world better.
Okay.
They wanted to unite good and wise men, to fight evil, to promote virtue, and to create a peaceful and happy society.
Lofty goals.
They were, and they believed in starting small, carefully selecting people and then gradually improving them.
So like a long-term plan, a gradual approach.
Exactly. Not a quick fix. Now, they also had this interesting idea about how they presented their teachings.
Okay.
They believed in veiling the truth, like not revealing everything all at once.
Like a gradual unveiling of the mysteries.
Right. They actually compared themselves to the Freemasons, saying that the Freemasons had this pure core of wisdom,
Right.
but that their outer form had gotten corrupted.
So they were trying to avoid that by keeping their core teachings secret.
Exactly. They wanted to protect the truth, make sure it was understood properly.
Interesting. So how do they actually recruit new members? I mean, if everything's so secret, how do you even get people in the door?
Well, they were all about subtlety.
Okay.
The superiors, they were told to guide people gradually, to make them want to join, not to force them.
So like plant the seeds, so to speak.
Yeah, through conversations about ethics, social bonds, knowledge. They also recommended certain books to potential recruits.
What kind of books?
Thinkers like Seneca, Plato, Cicero, even more modern writers like Wieland.
Okay.
Books with lots of imagery, moral lessons, the kind of stuff that makes you think.
So spark their curiosity, make them want more.
Exactly. And someone who was interested, they'd be called an insinuatus.
Insinuatus. Okay.
And they had to keep asking to be let in. They had to prove they were serious.
So, no casual members here.
Right. They wanted commitment.
So who helped these insinuati, these interested folks through the process?
Well, every candidate, they had a recipient, like a sponsor.
Okay.
They'd speak for the candidate during the initiation, vouch for them.
So like a guide, a mentor.
Yeah, kind of. And the superiors, the leaders, they had to report to the higher-ups every month.
Oh, what kind of reports?
They'd say how many new people they had, how everyone was behaving.
Okay.
They'd send in copies of the oaths new members took, the minutes from their meetings. It was all very carefully documented.
So accountability was important.
Definitely. They took their organization seriously. Now, once someone had a role in the order, what were they expected to do?
Yeah, what were the responsibilities?
Well, the big things were loyalty, diligence, and obedience.
So, the core values of any good secret society.
Right. And they really wanted to elevate their members, make them more receptive to goodness and wisdom.
Okay.
Even studied other groups to see what worked, what didn't.
So constantly learning, constantly improving.
Yeah. They believed in secrecy and in testing people before letting them in.
To keep the order pure, so to speak.
Exactly. Now, we also came across this preparatory essay.
Preparatory essay, okay.
And it had this really interesting idea in it. It said that people don't just live for their own happiness.
Okay.
They have a duty to help others, too. And it talked about the Illuminati being part of this long line of mystery schools, all dedicated to preserving truth and using it for good.
So they saw themselves as like guardians of wisdom.
Yeah, exactly. And this might surprise you, but they even had their own calendar.
Their own calendar, like why?
They used a term jesdigerd, and their year started in spring.
Okay.
They said it was based on a really important event in their history. And they claimed their history went way, way back.
So, added to the mystery, the mystique.
Yeah, creating their own separate world, in a way.
Fascinating. Finally, let's talk about the guidance for the superiors, the leaders. What did they have to do?
Well, their main job was to guide potential members, to nurture that desire to join.
Okay, so like careful recruitment.
Right. And they had to be good role models, showing reverence, obedience, and loyalty themselves.
Leading by example.
Exactly. And they had a whole list of rules. Give orders sparingly, enforce them strictly, reward obedience, punish disobedience.
Okay.
Remove troublemakers, give criticism rarely but firmly, avoid being too friendly, and always act for the good of the order.
So, pretty strict guidelines.
They were. And they were also told to choose a few trusted Minervals.
Okay.
And to focus on their education, to really mentor them.
So a very structured approach to leadership.
Yeah, very structured. And I think, what we've learned about the Minerval degree, it really challenges those crazy conspiracy theories about the Illuminati.
Right.
They weren't just about, controlling the world or anything like that. They were about self-improvement, ethics, helping others.
Right.
It was a system, a philosophy.
Yeah. It's fascinating, right? Looking at the real history, the real documents, it gives you a whole different perspective.
It does.
So, listeners, we've gone deep into the Minerval degree, the first step into the Illuminati, but there's so much more to
Oh,
uncover.
there is.
More rituals, more ranks, more secrets. So, stay tuned for our next deep dive where we'll explore even further into this fascinating world of the Illuminati.
And think about this, listeners. What we've learned about the real Illuminati, how might that have actually contributed to the myths?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, the secrecy, the rituals, the ambition, it's easy to see how that could get twisted, exaggerated.
Right.
So, keep that in mind as you continue exploring this world of secret societies.
Exactly. Always question, always dig deeper. And until next time, keep diving.